Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. I'm very late, but you knew that because you're smart on both accounts. You know that I tend to be late, and also that this is the Russ Joy Show, and that is my name. Now, I have to be honest. I didn't know how to start today's show. Those of you who have been keeping up with this show, the many of you who do, not only on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter, but also who follow along in the podcast feed, who I appreciate tremendously. I didn't do a show on Friday. And the reason was actually pretty simple. And if you follow what's been going on in the area, and if you especially are aware of what's been happening in the hockey world, you would have an idea of why I might not have done a show on Friday. And I wasn't sure how to touch on the tragedy that happened with the Gaudreau family at the end of last week. And I knew that if I came on, I don't know these guys. I know one person who is very close with them. I didn't know how to go about talking about it on Friday. I felt it was too raw. I felt like anything that you would try to say around it was going to be just it wasn't going to do justice by them or that situation. So I didn't do a show on Friday. And then I kind of sat back over the weekend and I was like, all right, on Tuesday's show, do we get into it at all? It's not necessarily about what happened to those guys, which is horrific, and what happened to their family, which is horrific. And I didn't necessarily want to lead the show with it, but I was like, do you start with the very serious topic and then end on a high note, and then everybody goes home happy into the week? Or do you start with like, rah, rah, the Phillies won, the Eagles are in Brazil, and then end on a down note? I'm going to start with the hard thing first. And so if you are, I don't know if the tragedy that happened with the Gaudreau family is something that you just can't bear, then you can skip ahead, and I'll have the notes on YouTube and I'll have the notes on the podcast feed, and you can just skip ahead. But I really am not here to talk about that tragedy itself because it's horrific. And the person who's been taken into custody, who apparently works in the recovery field, I don't want to open myself up to all kinds of liability things by saying how I truly feel about that person and the decisions that they made that led to the tragic end, the untimely end of two guys who have two little kids and a baby on the way, who have left behind two wives who love them, who have left behind parents who love them, who left behind at least, I think it's two sisters, but one who was set to get married on Friday, and all of the people around them who care about them. No, I can't get too far into it, because every time I think about the fact that there are three little kids who are going to grow up without their dads because of somebody's horrible decision to get behind the wheel after drinking, allegedly, who veered onto the shoulder of the road, allegedly, and took those two men down. Every time I think about it, it breaks my heart. And I think about my kids, and I can't get too far into it, or I will not feel great doing the show today. So there's one thing that I want to talk about from that situation. And then we're going to go rainbows and smiles, and we're going to be back in on the Phillies, and we'll be back in on the Eagles. I had a moment, I think it was Thursday night. And it was Thursday night, we get notice. The Snow the Goalie crew. We kind of hear that something horrible has happened. We're working to confirm. But we make the decision as the trio that regardless of whether or not the tip that we got is accurate, regardless of if we were able to triple, quadruple, quintuple verify it, we are not going to report it. We're not going to report what happened to Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. We're not doing it. It is not our place to report it. Yes, we are a well-known Flyers team affiliated, right? Like partnered with the team podcast. We are not reporting it. It is not our place. Whether the intel is good, great, indifferent, like we are not reporting it. And we knew that the info that we had was really strong, right? And things kind of came around. We had a very strong inclination that this horrible thing had happened. And there was actually another clue that came out, and I think it's okay now to say it because he went to Twitter and put it out himself on Instagram. But Hunter Brody was supposed to be on the radio on WIP on Thursday night after the final out. And when the initial tip came in about what had happened, I immediately turned on WIP because I said to myself, like, I knew he was going to go to the wedding the next day because they were friends. And when I heard he wasn't on and I heard it was a best of, It was this crippling, debilitating, just fear and confirmation that this horrible thing that we had heard, that we knew was good information, was official. That was about the final confirmation I needed. Now I was going to reach out to him because I can't imagine what he was going through. But we did the responsible thing. And I'm sure that there were other people who were in this area. And I haven't talked to a bunch of the other Flyers reporters and other people from this area who cover the National Hockey League in any capacity. I didn't reach out to the Charlie O'Connors of the world or the Kevin Kurzes or the Adam Kimmelmans or the Jordan Halls. I didn't reach out to those people, or the Bill Meltzers. Didn't reach out to them because I kind of knew that even if they had gotten the same intel, they weren't going to report it because it's not our place to report it. Not because Flyers people, not because we're from this area and we didn't cover the team that Johnny or Matthew Gaudreau were playing for, but because it's not the right thing to do. Because social media has this really weird ability, and we all know that it's out there, but social media has the ability to take something, to take one tweet put out by one non-anonymous account and start a firestorm. And when that tinderbox is lit, you can't take it back. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And unfortunately, there's a young blogger who decided that he was going to put something out to the masses. And he has a decent enough following. And he's been working to try to, I guess, make a name for himself and to work his way up and start a career, have a career in what he considers and put in his Twitter bio as journalism. And he put out a tweet. I'm not going to pull it up here because he deleted it, but there are screenshots floating around. I'm not going to read it exactly. But the gist of it was, he said, I'm not 100% sure, and this is a serious situation. And then he goes on to report that Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau had been killed in a tragic accident in Philadelphia. So Johnny Gaudreau and members of his family had been killed in a tragic event, tragic accident. Or was it a freak accident? I think it was a freak accident. Maybe I should pull it up. But this guy puts it out. Now, this guy has had some bumps in the road along the way. Again, he's young. Young doesn't mean you can make reckless and stupid and horribly chosen decisions and then call yourself a journalist. This guy did. Dylan Robillard. I think it's Robillard. I don't think it's Robillard. We'll say Robillard. He was working for Flyers Nitty Gritty, who have since decided to part ways. He had previously worked for the Hockey News, where he put a big thing out on Twitter about some kind of pay thing. His association there was ended. I forget where he was before that. I find it very hard to believe that he's going to find another job from a reputable outlet in the Philly area after all of this went down. But I will get back to that in a second. So he puts this tweet out. Now, up until that point, I had been scrolling. I had been refreshing Twitter nonstop because when we got the initial tip and we knew the information was solid and sound and good, I sat back and I'm like, we all knew this was going to be a massive story. It was going to be a tragic story. People were going to be very upset. And we all kind of sat back, Bundy, Ant, and I, we all kind of had this like, who's going to report it? And you figure it's probably going to be the team or there's going to be a statement from the family. But there's no fucking reporter on this earth who's going to try to report something that had just happened, like within hours. Nobody's stupid enough to do that. Nobody's reckless enough to do that. Nobody thinks that it's a good idea because being first when lives are on the line, when lives are potentially lost, is not the same thing as going out and putting out, oh, you know what? We think that Kevin Hayes is being traded to Columbus. We think Kevin Hayes is being traded to St. Louis. We think Morgan Frost is being dealt to Ottawa. We think Claude Giroux is going to be dealt back to the Flyers. It's not that. It's not a trade. It's not a signing. It's not a draft pick. It's not the potential firing of a coach or a GM or the termination of a player's contract. It's a fucking human being. And in this case, two human beings' lives who were ultimately lost, who leave behind families with kids, whose sister's wedding was set for the next day. And this guy, Dylan, ran off, could not have gotten to Twitter fast enough to put out, I'm not 100% sure. And it's a serious situation. And then put out things that were incorrect. It didn't happen in Philadelphia. It wasn't multiple other members of the family. you don't run with a report. You don't run with potential intel unless you have it on triple, quadruple sourced, perfectly sound information. And even then, when it is a human being's life, you don't report it. This isn't like some kind of grandstanding. I don't put journalist in my byline. I don't put journalist on Twitter or on Instagram or on YouTube. I don't do that. I'm not a journalist. I've never considered myself a journalist. I was for a little bit somebody who kind of covered the Flyers tangentially as like a blogger who like worked in tandem with Anthony Sanfilippo when he was over at Crossing Broad. We did those things together for a few years. We did Snow the Goalie more. We partnered more of like a media personality, I guess now. That I'm certainly not a journalist. I wouldn't call myself a journalist. This guy did. And he decided to run with this information that he had absolutely no right to report. And one of the things that had me the most upset over the weekend was watching a bunch of mouth-breathing dipshits defend him in the aftermath. Not defend him as, hey, he's a young kid, he made a mistake, he apologized, let's try to give him another chance. Those people, while I think they're wrong, that's different. We had a bunch of assholes who went out on Twitter who started saying things like, oh, people are just butthurt. Oh, let me see if I could. I think I still have the tweet because I like to out some of the mouth-breathing dipshits who actually do say stupid things that are actively bad for everyone. There was a guy who decided that he was going to say that it's just a bunch of, oh, the guy deleted his tweet. Of course he did, because this is what happens. All right. The guy tweeted at me tweeted at him saying that he reported the news correctly and the people are butthurt because they didn't have the information first. And what the hell did he said something about me. Like I have was it a Napoleon complex? I had something like I have some, it wasn't little dick syndrome. Believe me. I don't remember what it was. It was something like that. Right. So I go to Twitter and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to reply to this guy. I'm going to blast the guy fully. Right. So I tweet, no, dumbass. I called out his report because it was wildly inappropriate, didn't have proper sourcing, wasn't his place to speculate on. You think other Philly and national reporters didn't have any kind of information? You're out of your mind. It wasn't a trade or a signing. It was two brothers whose lives were taken in a senseless tragedy. 2 children and another on the way will grow up without their fathers. So you can miss me with being butthurt and kindly fuck all the way off. Now, if you know me and if you've been following me for long enough, you know that I tend to at least dial it down a little bit. I try not to go after people as hard as I could. Now, away from the internet, man, I will rip people a new one. If you come up to me at a Flyers game and you say shit like that to me, you will have a moment with me that we will not forget. But when it comes to Twitter, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they're a nameless, faceless account. Even if Gritty is their avatar, their profile picture, I tend to let those people alone because they are a waste of space. They shouldn't exist on Twitter. And if they do, they should have to put their name to the account. And we're not going to get into this whole thing. We're not talking about saying that everybody has to sign, put their social security numbers out there too. No. If you're going to put out some of the toxic bullshit that some of these people do, you should at least have to have your picture as your profile picture. We should at least get to see what kind of a reprehensible human being looks like. That's what we should get to do. As like normal functioning members of society, we should get to see what you look like. So anyway, that pissed me off. But it got worse. Now, I don't remember exactly which tweets got deleted, which ones didn't get deleted. But after this Dylan guy goes and puts out his tweet, okay? After he goes out and puts the initial tweet, and I say, this is reprehensible, this should be deleted, this needs to go, there's no reason to tweet at this. The guy doubles down. Now, I think he deleted a few of these, so I can't even like go back and see. Now, he deleted all of them, or his fiance did. Apparently, his fiance took over his Twitter account this week, which I feel bad about. I do. But he said something to the effect of everybody thinks he's an asshole anyway, and so what does it matter? Well, it matters because it's very simple. When somebody recklessly decides to put out the news of the deaths of other people, okay, where it's not your place, and if you're an aspiring media person out there, or you're an aspiring podcast host, or you're an aspiring, I don't know what, but anything that's front-facing through written, through podcast, through YouTube, through whatever, be responsible. Be better than this guy was. Do not rush to be first with news like this. You let it to the family. You let it to the organization. You don't report it yourself. If there are people out there who think that like the Pierre LeBruns and the Darren Dragers of the world, the Frank Saravallis of the world, who like Frank's from the area. If they don't think that those guys were aware of what happened and had the same information that we had, perhaps even more information than we had, you're out of your mind. They knew. At least one of them had to. And again, I would put significant money that other Flyers people in the area, and maybe even radio hosts and maybe even writers from not Flyers circles, were aware of what was happening in the moment. And nobody ran with it, because breaking that kind of news isn't something that gets you a feather in your cap. It's not something you put on a resume to be proud of. It means that you're the asshole who decided to break the ethics code. All right? It's not some magical written code. And if it's taught in journalism classes, I didn't take journalism classes. Again, I'm not a journalist. It is a basic tenet of human decency. You don't tweet that, even if you know the information's good. Which, by the way, the guy put out the thing that said, I'm not 100% certain. Then don't fucking tweet it. Don't put it out. Don't run with it. It's not your place. You're not that important. The reason that it's important, though, the reason that the breaking of this news when it shouldn't have happened was important is because, as I said before, once you like the tinderbox, that's it. The fire started and it spreads fast. So again, I'm sitting there scrolling Twitter last week and I'm just waiting. I'm waiting to see if a national guy's going to report it. I'm waiting to see if somebody that we've had on Press Row Show or that I've sat with on Press Row or covered Flyers games with is going to report it. Nobody does. This guy does. And he has a big enough following that all of the nameless, faceless accounts that had started to put out, I'm hearing this really sad thing happen, or like I live in the area, or I'm neighbors with, or whatever. Those people were tweeting. It wasn't getting a lot of traction because they have 50 followers, maybe 100 followers, but it's nothing big. This guy goes and puts it out. And then Twitter catches fire. So we started seeing things like Montreal Canadiens fan blogs started to quote tweet it. Starts a big firestorm. Within 25 minutes or so of him tweeting this out, there was a trending topic, at least locally, a trending topic on Twitter. At that point, it was over. Now, I tried to do my damage control by calling it out, by saying it was reprehensible, by saying it should be deleted. There's no reason to run with it. But by that point, within, I think it was an hour and a half of him tweeting it, it was too late. And even after he deleted it, it was screenshotted everywhere. It was passed all around NHL Twitter. It was out there for the world to see. The reason I got upset is he didn't know this. He probably didn't know this. But a lot of people didn't know it until the next day. Their sister was set to get married the next day. Imagine the joy turned to sorrow for that family and for their friends and for all those people who were there to celebrate a wedding the next day. Think about those people. And then maybe let it marinate in your head. It's the night before that wedding. It's possible that not all of those people were plugged into Twitter, and that those people might not have gotten word via phone, via text, from a good source, from somebody in their family to break that horrific news. Those people didn't have that ability. They didn't have that opportunity because this asshole decided that he was going to try to be first. That's why I got upset. It's not your place to report it. It never is, it never was, it never will be. You leave it to the family. You leave it to the organization that has the blessing of the family. You don't fucking put it out yourself. I got really upset. I'll tell you this. I am grateful. I'm not going to cry. I am grateful that social media wasn't as big of a thing when I was in high school. And I'm glad that it wasn't at the same level, right? But I lost a cousin who was killed in Afghanistan. And he's not a celebrity. He's not an NHL player. But if I hadn't gotten the call from a family member who told me the sad news, this horrible news, if I had to find it out from fucking social media before my family could inform me, I'd have lit the world on fire. I'd have been so pissed off. I'd have been wounded, hurt. It would have been horrific. And if you put yourself in the shoes of these people, you see like in the aftermath, people saying, well, do people care as much just because it's a pro hockey player? Because it's two hockey players. Drunk drivers kill people every day. You don't see this kind of outrage. I saw that shit on Twitter. And it's like, listen, fair point that a lot of people have rallied around this family. And there's a GoFundMe for Matthew Gaudreau's family. He obviously did not make it to the heights that his brother did. He did not get the multi-million dollar contracts that his brother did. There's a GoFundMe that people should go to contribute to for his wife and for their unborn child. But if you think about those people, right? If you try to put yourself in their shoes, Imagine the night before this wedding, you're not plugged into anything, right? You're just enjoying your night. You haven't heard anything, and then you start getting texts from people who aren't your direct family, aren't your direct friends, who say, is this true? Is what true? And then they send you the screenshot of this tweet, or they send you the tweet. Imagine how fucking hurt you would be. That's why you don't report something like that. It's not your place. I don't know. I don't know what goes through people's heads. I don't know what makes people want to get into doing media jobs. I have no idea. But this ain't it. Running with something like that when you're not sure, or prefacing it with you're not sure, you don't tweet it. And you know what? Like I said before, even if you do know it's true, you still don't report it. And if there are people like the Chuckle Fucks Gritty with a bunch of like 8 or 9 numbers after his name who since deleted his tweet, if there are people like that out there who say, well, if you guys are just butthurt because you didn't break the news first, no. What you need right now isn't a lesson on journalistic ethics. It's not about what is appropriate to tweet out at a given time. It's not about sourcing things correctly. You need a human life lesson. You need a lesson in empathy and understanding that human beings are more important than putting out a stupid report. And I did see, by the way, I saw a really quick note where somebody was like, oh, Rich coming from you guys with the Kevin Hayes thing. Rich from you guys. If you're fucking stupid enough at this point to compare what was sourced information, I don't know what to tell you. If you compare us in the moment on Snow the Goalie during the Press Row show saying that there were people who believe Kevin Hayes had influence on Cutter Gauthier not wanting to be here from very reputable sources who have never led us astray before. If you want to compare that, right? If you want to torch this shit, oh, that's the kind of thing that follows the guy. No, it's not. If you want to compare that to some jackass running off and tweeting something to be first about the death of 2 guys, if you want to compare those two, I don't know what's for you, but what I can tell you is you have a real strong disconnect between the importance of one versus the other. They're not the same. They're not even close. I'm going to go over to the comments here really quick. I'm not looking for engagement here. There have been some people over the weekend who did a lot of weird engagement farming, which is fucking gross. I'm not going to call those people out today because I just don't have it in me right now. But Sean C. says, credentials make some outlets too big-headed. The outlet the blogger worked for when he tweeted is led by a guy who continuously, intentionally misleads fans for clicks. I said the name of the outlet before. I have called out previously that guy, who seems like a nice guy, I don't think is a bad human being. I just don't think he gets it either. He has tweeted out things in the past, making it sound like he was at practices, was at things that were closed off. And then when I called him out on it, started tagging the people whose tweets he effectively was stealing and their points that he was stealing. But people still go there because people don't know better. They don't, whatever. People choose to follow what they want to. Says that teams need to be more selective when it comes to handing outlets like that access. Here's the thing. I think that to some extent, you're almost better off if you're the Flyers. If you're a team that's not the biggest team in town, the second biggest, third biggest, right? They're number 4 in town. It's better for you to have press row filled with people of all different walks of life from all different kinds of media outlets. Give them the access. Give them access to the players. If they do something stupid, you revoke their access. But you can't do what the Phillies have done for a long time, which is the Phillies are notorious for not giving access to non-traditional media outlets. Like, it was a legitimate fight when Anthony was still working for Crossing Broad. We'll talk about that in a second if you missed that news. But when Anthony and Bob Wankel were both down covering the Phillies, that was a big fight. That was a big thing. It was very hard to get Crossing Broad credentialed, even though Anthony especially had this extensive background in reporting, had worked for the Flyers, had covered multiple teams for the Delco Times and for others. That was a legitimate drag out fight for a while. And then they got credentialed and they've done a nice job and the Phillies have been happy ever since. You can't, if you're the Flyers, you can't like limit it to just legacy media outlets because press row ain't going to be filled, right? You're not going to have a lot of attention. It's better to give more outlets access. And then if they screw up, that's it. Now, could this lead to a ban of that outlet? I don't think so. I don't think Flyers Nitty Gritty is going to get banned from games. Jamie Baskow, it appears, took the appropriate step to sever ties with Dylan. It was a smart thing to do. Dylan needs some time away. I saw Dylan's fiance tweeted from his account and said that, there's been a lot of hate. She's been managing all of the stuff. And I actually do feel bad for her because she didn't have anything to do with this, right? She shouldn't necessarily have to be dragged into this. I do feel bad for her. I feel slightly bad for him in that he made a really stupid choice, but he doubled and tripled down on it initially, which is what I think was the part that was worse. He should have just deleted it, but he doubled down saying that people think he's an asshole anyway, yada, yada, yada. You don't do that. That just wasn't a good look. Let's see. Allison says, can't stop thinking of him and his family. I think that was in reference to, it might've been Broads. It might've been in reference to the Gaudreaus as a whole. Cause I think that was about the timestamp of when I brought up also what happened, with Broads not being on the air and then his, stuff on social. Allison says, you have every right to say what you said on Twitter. Preach. Hunter says, I hung up a game-worn jersey I had from Matthew when he played for the Royals. I hope the teams honor him in some way. His best pro year was with them. They will absolutely honor these guys. I would not be surprised to see patches the entire season in the NHL. I would assume that Gaudreau's number will be on a patch. I would not be surprised if either in the NHL or the AHL they had Matthew Gaudreau's number on a patch for the season. I think it'd be appropriate. I expect moments of silence. I expect things throughout the preseason. The hockey community has really rallied around that family. And I mentioned the GoFundMe before. They did... I saw the names of some people who are either players or player spouses that were contributing. And I know that like social media gets really negative a lot. I totally get it. I know that sometimes there will be people who would look at that and say like, well, he was still technically a pro. Matthew Gaudreau was technically a pro. Like, didn't he make enough money? Like, why do we have to do a GoFundMe? Because there are some horrible human beings out there who probably have tweeted that shit. I've actively chosen not to find it. No, he didn't make the same kind of money. And again, it's a tragedy. And like, while Johnny Gaudreau's family is probably very well off financially, they're probably sound. They lost the person who matters the most to them. So money doesn't bring that person back. On the Matthew Gaudreau side of things, I think it's great. I think the last time I saw it was over $200,000 had been raised, which is fantastic. And I hope that continues to grow. I might add the link to that in the episode description here, or if I clip this out and put it somewhere else, I'll make sure that I link to it as well. Sean C says, scrolling through this guy's Twitter account, the first reply he left up from 11 p.m. on Thursday is worth reading. Still didn't understand how he was wrong. I don't even have I don't know, Sean. I could pull it up, but I don't know if I even want to see it anymore. I just get very angry if I go to his Twitter right now. Jose Nunez said that he feels the same way about retirements, about like not preempting the player's announcement. Very different, maybe slightly more comparable than comparing it to a trade or a signing. Somebody works their entire career. They want to have their moment to announce their retirement. I think that's probably fair to some extent, but it's still, and I don't think Jose is comparing the two, but I get it. Nico said facts and well said. Sean C says, by the way, he was not told by anybody. He most likely found out on the Flyers subreddit about an hour after it happened. Those posts were nuked quickly off the subreddit. That's possible, but I will tell you, I had somebody DM me the next day, and they told me where they got their information from. And they said Dylan DM'd them, or they DM'd Dylan to get confirmation to say like, hey, this is what I heard from this person who works for whatever this is. I'm not opening myself up to this. I don't want to be liable. This guy reached out and said that he asked, and then they had a little back and forth, and that within minutes of him sending that DM, the Dylan tweet went out. So I believe that this guy had direct knowledge? Do I believe that he heard from the family? No. There was a rumor going around that there was a police officer who might have spread or mentioned it somewhere. I don't know if there's any validity to that. I'm not going to speculate. There was a thing that was going around. There was a Twitter account that showed an exchange, a text exchange with an alleged police officer. That was not true. If you saw that, that text was not real. That is a very strange account that had previously done a hoax around a shooting or something. Somebody traced it back. It's the same account They had done something like that before, saying that their brother was a cop in Texas. It might have been around Uvalde. I don't remember which shooting it was, but there's like a disgusting human being who like hoaxes this stuff. This again is why I say you should have to put your name out there. You should have to put your face out there. That person probably not a great guy or girl or gender nonconforming. Anyway, T-Mac, thanks for checking in. Says good stuff. Sean C thinks the Flames and Jackets will retire number 13. Entirely possible. I think I would say Calgary is almost a guarantee to retire it, is my guess. I'm not sure about Columbus. He didn't have a long career in Columbus. I'm not positive there. They will do something. Practically, like a guarantee. Sean C also notes that they've passed 500,000 on the Matthew Gaudreau GoFundMe, which is great. Okay, so I think we're okay. Sean C said, so the notepad was fake. I'm not sure which thing that was. There was a text exchange that was going back and forth between like a disgusting like parody account. I guess we'd call it a parody account, a hoax account. I'm not sure about the notepad. There was a thing also going around. Somebody said that the like medical examiner or somebody was like messaged a group chat or something. I don't know if that's true either. I think that there was enough shit going around, whether it was on a subreddit, whether it was, like I said, as I was scrolling and refreshing Twitter. I don't know if it was that. There was a lot of really bad information going on out there. Just really awful stuff. I don't know how to end this part of the show. I'm not exactly sure. I have expressed, and I noted before, I reached out to Broads, I think it was a couple days after, to just express condolences because I knew that they were friends. I didn't know they were super close. It was like, there can be a difference, right? He was devastated, which you would expect. He went on Twitter and Instagram and he put up some pictures and some things, and it's very sad. And again, people are going to process this very differently. There are a lot of people in the hockey world who didn't know these guys, who are very upset, are very devastated by this. All I can say is I will pray for their families. You can choose to if you are into praying for people, and if you're not, you can go hug a tree somewhere nearby and send good vibes their way. Whatever is good for you, send your good vibes. But condolences to their families, because this is truly awful and sad stuff. And I'm sure that when we come back this week with Snow the goalie, we'll dive into it a bit. But it hit us all very differently, and I can tell you that, maybe Bundy will speak on this a bit later in the week. But this guy who committed this horrible accident, this horrible incident, I guess I have to say allegedly for liability's sake, but like who allegedly was part of this. LinkedIn says that he's the director of finance for a substance abuse recovery center. Some people see that as irony. There are a lot of people who are who work for companies like that, who have gone through addiction, who have gone through things that are trying to help people on the other side. But I don't know what this guy was thinking. And I don't know what anybody was thinking letting him get behind the wheel of a car. That's where I'll end that for now. Now I'm going to reset. Okay. Spend a half hour on this. And this isn't going to be fake, but we're going to reset. We're going to try to bring a little bit of positivity. And for all the people who either decided to watch this show or listen after the fact, who just wanted to have a little bit of positivity, a little bit of Phillies talk, a little bit of Eagles talk, we're going to dive into that. So we're going to reset here. I know it's going to seem kind of weird. I totally get it. I acknowledge it. We're going to come back here in about 30 seconds, and we're going to act like it's a normal show, but I needed to get that off my chest, and I didn't know when the best time to do it was, so we started the show with it. And when we come back, we're going to dive into the Phillies having a big series win against the Braves, the Eagles being in Brazil, and some of the goofy things that are happening around the reporters down there. And I'll end it on this before we reset. Beer Chips and Politics over on Twitter says it's been a brutally hard weekend for the NHL. Thoughts and prayers going out to the Gaudreau family. That's a good way to end it. All right, we'll be back in 30 seconds, continuing the Russ Joy Show. Here we go. Welcome back to the Russ Joy Show, where we are going to transition away from a topic with a ton of gravity, and now we're going to talk about sports. It makes sense if you don't think about it. Now, we have two things that we can talk about. We have the Phillies, we have the Eagles, and we have the sneeze that's about to fly out of my face that couldn't do it during the 30-second countdown. That was gross. Now, I think we're going to start with the Phillies because I feel great about your team, your town, your Philadelphia Phillies. Let's start there. And then we're going to talk about the Eagles because there's something really funny happening, not just with the Eagles players themselves, but with the media who cover them because it's in Brazil. The sneezing has begun. Thank you over to Mike, who says salud. Spanish is salud. If you're Italian, salute. The more you know. Anyway, let's talk about the Phillies. So at last Tuesday, I kind of previewed what the Phillies were getting into. And I said, boy, they need to have a good series against the Astros because you can't possibly go into a series, a 4-game set with the Braves, riding a bad streak. You can't possibly leave the Astros series feeling bad about yourselves. And what did the Phillies proceed to do? That night, that Tuesday night, they won 5-0 against the Astros. We're feeling great. And then the next day happened, and it was a 10-0 loss. And that was a game where we saw Taijuan Walker go back out. And I said to you, I said to all of you, all you wonderful people out there, I said it was organizational malpractice to continue to trot Taijuan Walker out onto the mound as a starter for this team. I've been saying it for months. I've been saying it for a year. Some people had made excuses for it, whatever. And I said, Rob Thompson, you can't come out. You can't come out and say that you are encouraged by velocity. You can't do that. And if it doesn't go well, you can't possibly sit back and say, oh, we're good. Everything's hunky-dory. We're going to feel wonderful about it. Nay. You can't do that. I said, you have got to make sure that you figure out an alternative plan for Taijuan Walker because this guy ain't the guy. You can't continue to roll out with him. And what did the Phillies do? They rolled him out. He got lit up, 13 hits, 6 runs in 6 innings. It was bad, very bad. So you went into the series against the Braves riding a 5-0 loss, and then you go, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry. I misspoke before. They won 3-2 against the Astros. They lost 5-0. No, I am right. It was 10-0 against the Astros. Then it was like, all right, you got to hope that when you go into the Braves game, the first game of that series where you flipped Christopher Sanchez and Taijuan Walker because you knew you needed the win, you had to go out and show out and do all the things that you needed to do and do it the right way. And the Phillies got off to a little bit of a rocky start. They fell behind 3-0, but they ultimately won the game 5-4. Christopher Sanchez was fine. 2 earned runs in 5 2/3 innings. You're feeling good about it. Then you go, all right, well, cool. Now we're going to hand the ball off, and things should be going in the right direction. Ranger Suarez will be on the mound. Suarez was okay, but not great, not exactly spot on, wasn't exactly precise, gave up 4 runs in 4 innings. Okay, fine. Braves won that game. There started to be some alarm bells because the hitting had kind of stopped. 5 runs in the series opener, only 2 runs in Rangers start, and then you start to sit back and say, oh no, we can't possibly have a moment where the Phillies bats are going to go cold again. It can't happen in this series. It could be catastrophic. Luckily for the Phillies, their bats didn't exactly come back to life in the 3rd game, but they had a shutout. And why did they have a shutout? Well, because they got on Max Fried a little bit. But no, it was more because Zach Wheeler looked like the second coming of peak Cliff Lee, of peak Roy Halladay, 7 shutout innings. He did the thing the ace is supposed to do. He reset the series. He made everybody feel great. Everything was hunky-dory. Good job to Zach Wheeler. And then you looked at the finale and you said, by George, if the Phillies can win the finale and they can win 3 out of 4, it's a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a win for your team, your town, your Philadelphia Phillies. But Aaron Nola was going to be on the mound. And what did everybody say? What does everyone always say about Aaron Nola? When the chips are down, when the games matter the most, he disappears. He almost always lets you down. And what happened early in that game? He gave up a run in the 2nd. He gave up a run in the 3rd. You start going, oh no, it's happening again. Aaron Nola's being Aaron Nola. We can't have Aaron Nola be Aaron Nola today of all days. We can't split with the Braves. You need to win 3 out of 4. You still have a chance. The bats aren't fully alive, but there's a possibility to win 3 out of 4. Aaron Nola, can you figure it out? So they get through the first 4 innings. They're still down. And what happens? The bats come alive a little bit. Aaron Nola settles in. 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 4 hits. It was a wonderful performance by Aaron Nola. It's the kind of performance that I think everybody often hopes to have from Aaron Nola. It's the kind of thing you expect from a guy who had been your opening day starter multiple times. Now, I have to pause here for a second because I hear my sump pump beeping. And if this continues, I'm going to lose my mind. So here, we're going to do this. Watch this. Ready? This is how high tech we are at the Russ Joy Show. I'll be back in 5 seconds. Now, if your question is, Russ, did your basement flood? No, it didn't. I'm just too lazy to put distilled water into my sump pump backup battery. I should do that. Anyway, Aaron Nola did exactly what he was supposed to do. Everybody felt great about it. You walk away from it and you say, Nola stepped up enough in a big moment. The bats didn't come alive, but they came enough alive to get you a 3-2 win. Now, all of a sudden, the Phillies leave that series with a bigger lead in the NL East than they entered with. There are 7 games up on the Braves. The calendar has now flipped to the month of September, and now you look ahead and you start to think to yourself, is there a chance that the NL East race is over? I say no, not necessarily, but it is a lot easier. That's it with the Braves. You're done playing against the Braves this season. And to that end, it is going to be almost impossible for them to make up that 7-game lead in a meaningful way. There are plenty of games remaining, but you need a lot of bad Phillies baseball and a lot of great Braves baseball for Atlanta to get back into it. Now, you do have a couple of games. You have a couple series against the Mets that aren't necessarily make or break, but you do have to make sure you perform well in them. The Mets are only 7.5 games back, and with 2 series remaining in the month of September, there is a possibility that things can get a little bit uncomfortable there. But for now, it does appear the Braves are kind of DED dead. Maybe. We don't know for sure, but it's probably safe to say that the Braves are mostly, if they're not done yet, they're pretty close. The Mets might be another story. It's important that the Phillies have some good series against them coming up. But before we can get there, the Phillies begin a series Tuesday night against the Blue Jays. It's a 2-game set. Then they're at Miami. Then they're home against the Rays, home against the Mets, at Milwaukee, at the Mets, home against the Cubs, at the Nationals to end the season. Just based on those matchups, there are a couple of doozies. And again, there are meaningful games against the Mets. But for all intents and purposes, the NL East race should be done. Now, there are concerns. And everybody knows me well enough at this point that when I see a concern, I'm going to voice a concern. Bryce Harper is not Bryce Harper right now. I don't know what's wrong. It does, in fact, appear that there's probably an injury. He's probably carrying some sort of injury. The power isn't there. The guy doesn't look like himself. You have to hope that at some point he's going to be able to figure it out. He's going to be able to find his power again. Because while he can be a good enough hitter for average, and while, hitting number 3 in the lineup, he's going to have plenty of opportunities to drive home Schwarber and Turner. Ultimately, you still want to see him have the threat of crushing the ball out of the park. Now, I do owe a sort of mea culpa here to Nick Castellanos, who has been massive for this team. While Harper's power's kind of gone away, while there's been some inconsistent hitting up and down the lineup, Nick Castellanos, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, has decided that he's going to look a lot like the guy that we all kind of hoped and thought he was going to be when he first landed in Philadelphia on a large contract, including a walk-off hit. The walk-off hit against Atlanta was ginormous, right up the middle, ends the game. He feels good about it. There's a weird interaction between him and the reporter from ESPN after the fact where she kind of didn't know. She wasn't maybe informed well enough about the fact that the phone that rang in the scrum a couple nights before wasn't Castellanos' phone. It was a reporter's phone. A little bit of weird interaction there. I don't think she totally knew how Nick Castellanos tends to Belichick or Popovich his answers in post-game remarks. Anyway, Castellanos has been really good. He's been relatively clutch. We could even make the case. He's sort of been a workhorse. He's sort of been an Iron Man for this team this year. Now, I'm not one to just kind of wave the magic wand and say everything's hunky-dory and that the guy is perfect. He's far from it. But in a season where there have been moments where he's legitimately looked lost at the plate, for him to just not lose confidence and for him to go up and perform in big moments, I think I said this a few weeks ago, if you can just get some version of Castellanos that's passable in the postseason, this team very well could blow their way through the NL race and make it to the World Series. I've compared Castellanos a few times to like Pat Burrell, and I know it's not like the most apt comparison, but like in theory, they were both much more well-known for their abilities at the plate than they were in the field. They had the ability to hit for average, at least early. Burrell, the thought was early in his career, he could hit a little bit better for average, but he was really a power guy. But the streakiness, where it would look like for a 10-game set, each of these guys could look like they've never taken a major league at bat before. And then the next 6 games, they could tear the cover off the ball. And then it could go like 11 games where they have like a single multi-hit game and a bunch of, golden sombreros. Like there is at least a slight comparison you can make between the two. Castellanos is streaky. If he's on for the postseason, this Phillies team is going to be really hard to beat. But anyway, kudos to him. Seriously, kudos to him for performing in big moments. Now, let's go over to some of the comments. Sean C. says, the total pessimist in me feels like a total letdown week is on deck for the Phillies. 6 games against teams below 500. Sky Dome has been a house of horrors for over 30 years. LOL. Possible. I don't think they're going to. Every time I try to prognosticate about the Phillies and I say they're on their way up, they fall apart by the Friday show. So I'm going to conservatively say here, I think the Phillies are going to be able to play 500 baseball from now until the end of the season, and that should be good enough for them to win the NL East. You do have to keep an eye just on the rest of the National League, though. You still want to have home field advantage. Like 500 baseball probably doesn't get you there, but it probably does win you the NL East. Let's see. Sean also says, Nola is this team's Cole Hamels. The city loses its collective minds with every run he gives up. He has a 1.44 ERA in the last month. Sean, I don't give Aaron Nola the benefit of the doubt because he was like the first pro athlete to be endorsed by my good friends over at Yuengling Brewery, who are from my hometown. They don't sponsor the Russ Joy Show or Snow the Goalie. They probably should, but they don't. So if anybody's listening from my hometown of Pottsville, it's time for me and Dick Yuengling or one of his daughters who run the business to have a conversation. Because, I proudly support the fine folks at Yuengling, America's oldest brewery. But anyway, Nola was the first guy that they really sponsored. And, and he proceeded to go out and turn from potential future ace to whatever he is now. Again, I don't think anybody's ever questioned that Aaron Nola has Cy Young stuff and has like the ability to be an ace. It's just somewhere up here, there's a disconnect for like crazy stretches of games. And like when the wheels fall off, they really fall off. He might not give up a lot of hits, but they tend to be home runs or they tend to be, moments that kind of matter and a lot of runs come in and then you go, oh shit. Let's see what else. Jamie over on YouTube. Thanks for checking in. Jamie says Zielecki broke last week. Harper has irritation in his elbow and wrist, and it's been in his wrist since May. Well, here's the thing about elbows and wrists. You don't need them. You don't need them. I watched a clip from the Paralympic Games. There was a guy from China who had no arms, and he got the silver medal in, I think it was freestyle, which was incredible. That was a mind-blowing performance. And the only reason that he didn't win is because he had to slam his head into the wall, and the other guy next to him had at least one arm and was able to reach out. I don't think that should have counted. I think they all should have had to go head first if that was the case. But anyway, you don't need wrists. You don't need elbows. Now, in the case of Harper, here's the tricky thing, right? The wrist. He's had this issue since May, but his power has lowered. The elbow, I think, is actually a bigger issue. Now, your real problem if you're the Phillies is, what kind of injury is it? Because if it's something that could be taken care of with rest, you would have to hope that the rest of the lineup can keep this team afloat. And again, 500 baseball probably wins you the NL East. It might not win you the National League pennant, or it might not win you the National League, the top spot in the standings, and it might not get you home field. But like, if you're giving me two scenarios here, Bryce Harper continues to play almost every game. The elbow and the wrist don't get any better. And you win, or you get home field advantage. Or Bryce Harper takes some time off, does get healthy, and you finish with the second best record in the National League. I'll take the second option. I'll take the latter, because a fully healthy Bryce Harper is significantly more important to this team than having home field with a reduced value Bryce Harper. That's where I'm at. I could be wrong. You might disagree. You can let me know in the comments. But I would rather see him get some rest and actually get healthy. I think ultimately that's what matters more for the Phillies. And it matters more for the Phillies to have a chance of advancing farther in the postseason. I saw a couple of notes also. I saw a couple of notes over on the hockey front really quick. One was about Draisaitl. Sean C. says, the Leon Draisaitl Flyers dream is dead before it could even begin. 8 years, $112 million, $14 million AAV. That to me is an underpay for Leon Draisaitl. And yet there are some that I'm sure will say that it's an overpay. I think it's an underpay. It's an interesting contract. He's locked in. Good luck to Edmonton. And also, I guess Torrey Krug is out for the year. Dodge that bullet big time. Indeed. I guess. Depends on what Travis Sanheim is, but you're probably right. Chris Freed says, greetings from Rio, where Twitter and YouTube work, but Odyssey does not. That plane ride is going to impact the play of both teams on Friday. Chris, I have a lot of questions for you. I really do. I might have to bring Chris on the show on Friday just to give us a report, a live report from Rio. I thought Twitter doesn't work down there. I thought that was the whole thing. Twitter doesn't work. Or is it you can't tweet? Can you refresh? Chris, are you using a VPN? You're going to be our man on the ground. Special correspondent to the Russ Joy Show, Chris Freed, over on YouTube. Get in touch with me. Shoot me a DM on Twitter. I have questions for you while you're down there. But I did see that there are a lot of interesting things happening down there with the Eagles and with their reporters, which I want to get to in a second. But first, Sean C. says, I just want the wild card round bye. There's no home field advantage in Dodger Stadium or Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee's actually a better home field advantage than Dodger Stadium, because I think the Dodgers just have so much pressure on them year in and year out, and we've seen an inability for them to meet expectations or to exceed them. So, I agree on the Dodger Stadium thing. I think that Milwaukee, it's probably more of a home field advantage for them. Do I think a Phillies team that plays really well could still go in there and win? Of course. I'd rather have home field, but again, I'd rather also have a perfectly healthy Bryce Harper. Now, last thing of the day, before we get into what happens the rest of the week, and I actually do need to field your thoughts, so you can DM me on Twitter or on Instagram at JoyOnBroad. You can drop them on YouTube, on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel. You can figure out another way, carrier pigeon or whatever, to send me a message. I want to know what you want to do for Friday. Friday, my intention was, all right, I'll do show in the morning. We'll kind of preview the game. We'll get ourselves ready. We'll get ourselves all eagled up, right? We'll talk about whatever happens in the Phillies series, and we'll catch any other big news, and we'll kind of talk about it. But my thought was do a Friday preview show. But then I was like, well, the game's on Friday night. Do we just do a post-game show? Do we all just agree, all of you who watch the show, do we just agree to come here post-game? Do I do a morning show and then turn around that night and do a nighttime show? I don't know. Let me know. Let me know what you're up for, and I'll adjust accordingly. There's actually a small, sick part of me that kind of wants to do a post-game show, maybe bring somebody on to talk about it, so I'm not just talking to myself, and we can have our thoughts on the Eagles game. Perhaps throw the phone number out there that if you have live reactions to the game, you can call the phone number for the Russ Joy Show, and you can leave a message, and you can let me know how you're feeling in the moment. That is one thing that I think I'd like to start kind of incorporating into this show a little bit, is that there is a phone number and that you can call it, and that when you do, I can maybe play your messages on the show. So maybe we'll do that. We'll see. I just got a DM, by the way, over on Twitter from Chris Freed. So special correspondent might be checking down. He said he's riding down from the Christ the Redeemer mountain, and Twitter has worked fine all week. I have a lot of questions because apparently, as we all know, I think we all know, big issue over in Brazil, down in Brazil, with Twitter, with shutting down Twitter. It has led to Eagles reporters being kind of, I don't know, leaving people being felt a little bit wonky. Some of the reporters are a little bit worked up that they can't tweet or allegedly can't tweet from Brazil. And I'm actually going to I saw it was over on the Go Birds podcast feed. Elliott Shore Parks put out an update since he can't tweet from there, apparently. He must be sending videos somewhere. He must be sending them to someone else. Here, I'm actually going to let's throw the ESP thing on here. Now, you'll notice that the audio is not great because he doesn't have like a clip-on mic or anything. So he's just got a lot of wind resistance. But if you've been wondering to yourself, how the hell is ESP going to deal with being down in Brazil and not being able to tweet? The guy who's been, tweeting stats from training camp all summer. How's he going to make this work? Let's check in. Let's see how he's doing.
What's going on, everybody, here in Brazil for day one of the Eagles week in Brazil. They're not going to get here till Wednesday. I'm already here with a few hundred Eagles fans. Fans of Philly did it once again. Really, really cool here. Awesome in Rio for a few days. Already a ton of Eagles green. You can see it in the airport on the way there. Not just the fans of Philly, like there's just a lot of Eagles fans here. When you get here in the airport, Eagles hats, Jalen Hurts jerseys, Jordan.
He's gonna blow away.
That travel after doing the 10 hours include the airport time 11-12 hours. They're going to be traveling all day Wednesday, get in Wednesday night, different practice field on Thursday. It's a challenge. I was looking forward to Brazil all summer, and I think it's going to be an awesome experience. I think it's a game they can win. It's going to be a great test. But now that I've done the travel, now that I'm here, I mean, come on, like it is beautiful here. Like, don't get me wrong, I am very, very excited about Brazil. But it is going to be a challenge for them for sure. So I'm excited. I know they voiced some concerns about it.
All right, so I'm going to end it there because like the sound is actually bothering me. So if you're listening, don't blame me. Blame Elliott Shore Parks for not having a mic and for talking on the rooftop of some building where it was very windy. As he noted, Brazil looks beautiful. Looks beautiful. I have a question though. So like he notes the fact that like the travel's rough. Chris Freed checked in and said the travel's rough, right? It's not an easy flight. It's not a short flight down there. There's a lot that has to get done getting you from the airport to where you're going. If the Eagles aren't flying down until tomorrow, till Wednesday, and then they're going to practice Thursday and the game is Friday, to me, that is like a total cluster. Why did you not fly down sooner? Like, let's go back to like a basic thing from the preseason. The starters didn't play at all. You need to find rhythm. You got to like, why allow yourself to potentially be jet lagged? Why potentially allow yourself to like be at a competitive disadvantage? Now, I don't know what the Packers travel is. I don't know. The Packers might already be there. They might not be getting there till Wednesday either. I know that like a lot of the players seem to be concerned about some of the restrictions they were given about being in Brazil and what you can and can't do and all that. To me, like I would have thought like get the guys in town Monday night, be ready to do like some kind of a walkthrough Tuesday, practice Wednesday, maybe practice Thursday, and then Friday you're fine. Now, Kevin at I Rock Philly over on YouTube says the longer in Brazil, the more chance for bad things to happen. If that's the case, let's just play a little game here. Let's play how scary is Brazil, okay? If Brazil's that scary, which it might be, I don't know. If Brazil's that scary, you shouldn't be playing a game there, right? Like if you can't ensure the safety of your players and their families or whoever else, then don't play the game there, right? Like, should that have to be said? I don't know. Maybe it does. I would like to believe that, like, if you're the Eagles, you have to feel good enough about your hotel accommodations and everything that's been set up by the league that, like, you're good to go, that you should feel safe. And maybe it is a stay in the hotel or stay in these certain places, but, like, I don't know. If the travel's as bad as it sounds and they're not going to get there till Wednesday and then they're going to have a real brief practice Thursday, like, I don't know. They might not look right on Friday. Here's the big thing that we all need to accept. And I'll talk about this on Friday's show. You can't take a lot away from Friday's game against the Packers. If the Eagles look like shit, you can't really think that that's what the Eagles are going to look like this year. Social media will light up with it. Sports talk radio will light up with it. But you can't really discern a lot from what you see on Friday. The starters didn't play in the preseason. If the Eagles look bad, well, I come here on Tuesday or whatever day I decide to do the show next week. I'm like, run with that. It all depends. It depends on how bad they look. You know, if it's If it's they're rusty, maybe I give them a little bit of latitude. Maybe I wait till week 2. But like the starter's not playing, not ideal. Then you fast forward to this potential issue with travel. That kind of gives you a little bit of something you could write off. Oh, it was just a travel. Then in week 2, you better look sharper. I'm not exactly sure what to expect on Friday. If the Eagles look great, if the Eagles are executing at a really high level, we can probably take from that, hey, the preseason reps not happening didn't affect the team if they do really well. But it doesn't mean that the Eagles are infallible, and it won't mean that the Eagles are a perfect team or that they're like going to win the Super Bowl. It could be that the Packers also weren't ready, or the Packers like didn't prepare well enough, or the travel got to them. So like, again, if the Eagles look horrible on Friday, you don't read a ton into that until you see what week 2 looks like. If the Eagles look amazing, you still don't take it as gospel. And you say like, all right, they're not rusty, but it could be that the Packers were like not great. And I think that's fair. That's where I'm at. Let's see. Is there anything else over in the comments? Hunter Miko says, NFL isn't that big brain. They obviously shouldn't be sending 2 green teams down there, but they did it. Maybe it's going to be like an Impractical Jokers episode. Sean thinks that going to Brazil is dumb anyway. Kevin thinks that his prediction is the Eagles offense is going to look decent, but the defense will not. We're going to find out on Friday. Again, let me know in the questions, in the comments of this video. If you're watching on the Russ Joy Show channel, if you're watching on the Joy Media LLC channel, if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, let me know. Should we do the Friday morning show to kind of preview things and talk about the Phillies? I tend to think yes. Do we do a post-game show on Friday after the game? I think that next week I might do a show on Monday instead of Tuesday. It all depends. So keep your eyes peeled to social media. I'll try to put some kind of like community post over on YouTube to let you know what I'm thinking. The days of this show and the times might start to change next week. My only remaining child home with me goes off to school. And at that point, I can kind of get back into some semblance of a normal schedule. I still think that like 8:30 is going to be the way to go with this show going forward. I think 8:30 is probably like the safe time for me to do it. I can get all the kids off to school. 8:30 is solid. But the Tuesday, Friday thing might change. That might shift a little bit. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'm always open to taking your thoughts into mine because I appreciate all of you. I appreciate those of you who watch the show and those of you who listen after the fact in the podcast feed. So for now, I'm going to say so long until later this week. The Eagles will be back in action. A very long wait from the offseason will finally be over. We'll all get to enjoy watching the Eagles together. And the Phillies have another series that could mean something. Let's see if they can even open up the lead in the NL East a little bit more. And we'll monitor if anything happens with the Flyers. Matvei Michkov is supposed to be at the rookie showcase, so we'll keep up to date on that. We'll see if anything else happens with the Sixers. We might even talk about a little bit of Union this week. Probably not, but maybe. Who's to say? All right, so with that in mind, I want to thank everybody who joined the stream live with their comments today. And I want to thank all of you who watch after the fact and listen after the fact in the podcast feed. So until Friday, I'm Russ Joy. This has been the Russ Joy Show. I appreciate all of you, and I'll talk to all of you in a few days.